Structural engineering is an art, not because it's subjective, but because you have to make judgment calls on how structures are actually going to behave, where loads are going to go, and how the system is going to perform. You're trying to estimate something that's not precisely right, in materials that you don't completely know, in a way that you can make sure it's safe and no one knows that you're actually just guessing. Because most of the time you have to make judgment calls and simplifications in the analysis that you do. Not every single structure can be done to a level of detail and testing that would be needed to understand it precisely. And strut-and-tie modeling is one of those key aspects that structural engineers have that you can show off the art. You're actually showing where the forces flow, provided that you put them together. Now, it's not just making up any load path, because loads still need to travel in certain ways. It's understanding how the forces can actually flow through so that you can simplify them and make sure the structure is not overstressed. So the question is, have you actually made a real strut-and-tie? Is the compression force on the side that you actually need it? Example, if you've got flexure, is the compression force on the top of the beam if you're bending down, and the tension force on the bottom. You can't really do the reverse, as the load path won't actually work. And a lot of time you're actually looking at truss modeling to see how the forces can actually flow through correctly. And if you wait a minute or so, I'll give you the 3 key tests that you need to do to your strut-and-tie to make sure it's performing as expected and not just how you want it. You see, in strut-and-ties, you have these regions called B regions or beam regions. In B regions, things remain stable, strains are already expected, life is good. The system behaves in the linear range and it's very easy to predict. And you have these other regions, D regions, or like disturbed regions, where structures won't actually perform as expected, where loads are disturbed, so you get these peak stresses that you need to watch out for. And typically in these regions, strains that go a little bit non-linear, they're not behaving so much like standard flexure and bending. They're behaving more like a strut, where it's strutting down to a specific location. When you get a beam, it's easy to look at that beam to understand where you are. So you've got a simple beam, mark where your D regions are and where your B regions are, just know how your structure is actually going to perform. So near the supports, typically have 1 or 2 D, which is in a D region. Then you'll go into a B region if you have no disturbances, but if you have a hole, D, or the depth of the beam either side, becomes a D region as well. After you get that point, it goes back to a B region, and then you move along that beam until you get to the other support where you're getting the D region at the other side. By setting out these B and D regions, it gives you a simple map of where you actually need to do the strut-and-tie and where you don't. So you can just do portions of beams with strut-and-tie around those penetrations, but then do other regions with Bs outside of that. So it makes it easy to follow where you don't need them. And understanding the language of strut-and-tie, it really falls into 3 key components. And these are how the different systems behave and interact. You have your struts. Now, these are arguably one of the things that you'll use all the time, and they're one of the things that you actually think about where forces are flowing. And these are in compression, so the concrete is actually taking them, and they have a defined width and position. The next one, which couples with your struts, is your ties. As the name suggests, it's tying the structure together, or they're your tension forces, or where you need the tension reinforcement in your system, because that's where it's going to crack. And then you have your nodes. Now, nodes are where you're building your strut-and-tie or your truss system from. They're where all the nodes come into one area and go out. So you could have a compression strut, and a compression strut all in one region, or a tension tie, and compression strut, or any combination. Just how the nodes are coming together and the forces for your strut-and-tie or your truss system is acting. And they're where you also need to do different checks as well, because they're places of peak compression forces. And most of the time you're trying to keep things at right angles and at center points. So it means that typically you want to have a hydrostatic node at that point, is it where everything is coming in one region. But sometimes with fan struts or other combinations, you might have what is called a non-hydrostatic node, which means that the struts aren't necessarily at right angles to each other. In most systems, you will be trying to keep those hydrostatic nodes as much as possible, because they make things easier and simpler to check. See, when you have a strut, you can see the compression strut coming down from 2 sides in a deep beam. You have your 2 nodes and a tie between them. That strut needs to be developed by the time it gets outside where the compression strut would come in. It's not right at the back face of the node. It's not right as it comes out. But if you have the compression strut coming out, you'll have a line through here as the compression strut comes down. At this point is when it needs to be developed. If you look at FEA as well, you'll see that. You'll see the tension coming up and arching through the middle. That's because at the node positions, it doesn't need to be fully anchored at this point. But once it comes outside that node, you need to watch out, especially in that compression strut area, is the critical location of where the development needs to start. And if you don't consider it, not having development means that your strut-and-tie will just flail out, as you don't have anything tying it back in together to keep the arching system that you need in that strut-and-tie system. What a lot of people can do with strut-and-tie is drawing the truss system that you actually want. Drawing nice clean systems, where you want the forces, and how you can make things easy. Yes, you can make it work on paper, but is that actually what's happening? Because if it's not, forces can go elsewhere and you can have cracking where you don't expect it. So by making a truss that isn't actually mimicking real life, meaning you're not reinforcing it where it needs to. Now that's what strut-and-tie is meant to be doing. You're meant to adjust about how the system's actually behaving. Where are the compression forces and where the tension? The compression forces are right at the top. Have you made sure that your strut-and-tie adjusts for this? If not, is there some secondary actions that you've got to watch out for in the system? You could be just kidding yourself about how the forces are actually behaving. In the end, maybe you've got enough strength in there because the strut will eventually form to that position, but it may need a lot of cracking or movement before that actually occurs. Now here's the framework to make sure that you're setting up your strut-and-tie correctly. You look at your boundary conditions. So where are your supports and where's the force need to go? Is there any critical holes or something that you need to go around to make that system work? Also keep in the back of your mind where forces should actually be. Where are the compression forces and where are the tensions in your system? Where are your actually D regions? So going back to that strut-and-tie drawing that we had before, we had B and D regions. Where are they actually? Where are the tension forces actually going to be in your system, and where are the compression forces? Are they at the top, middle, bottom? And what are the things causing those D regions to be there? Are they just supports? Are they holes? Are they penetrations? There's something that needs to arch around certain positions. Knowing where your system needs to interact with to make sure you're getting to that final solution. If you can't clearly see where those forces are, maybe you need to go back to and draw some pictures to see how the forces are actually flowing through your system. Sometimes FEA can help you there. You can do an FEA model, modeling the penetrations and seeing where the compression forces are actually going. That's going to be a better realistic assessment of how the forces are actually flowing through your system instead of just guessing. Now, this is all about drawing your arrows and how the forces are actually starting to flow through. So it's giving those key locations on your system about where the forces should actually go. So where your node's going to be in this system to make this strut-and-tie actually work. And by moving those boundary conditions around, you can change how the forces actually flow through your system. Sometimes you can get a really low time because you make the struts very, very shallow. However, for that to actually occur, you needed cracking further up because forces will actually flow at 45 degrees. So have you actually thought about how those forces are flowing and are they behaving correctly in your system as you're expecting? Step 2 is building out that truss. Now this is really where the art comes in. So where your ties, where your struts, and where is all that through your system? So where are those things coming from? So how is the force actually flowing down? Is it coming down and then getting an arching effect? Have you taken into account any secondary actions from those forces and how they're actually flowing? So this is around doing that art that we were talking about before to say how things are actually arching and where the forces are actually in your system. This is building out your web members, your top and bottom chords, and that truss throughout your system to make sure the forces are actually flowing where you want them to be. So this allows you to move the nodes slightly here and there and about how the forces are actually flowing. You can't make them either too shallow or too steep, otherwise you're underestimating where the loads are going to go. Now sometimes there is different circumstances because the forces will actually get that steep due to geometry or where the point loads are, but most of the time forces want to flow at an even rate and an even angle. So most of the time you're trying to keep things to about 45 degrees unless something is actually resisting it from that position. Other times you can actually go shallower like you would in strut-and-tie for shear. It's a very similar concept about how the forces are actually going to flow. Now step 3, and this is detailing. Now this is detailing up your system such that it can resist those loads. Have you ensured that your system is actually anchored in the ties in the right positions to make sure the forces don't actually splay out and can actually be resisted? In the compression struts, have you actually put confinement where you need them to get those additional strengths if needed? Have you confined the areas of high loads and made sure things aren't too congested? And one thing we keep going back to is anchorage. And too often we've seen failures where things haven't been properly anchored, causing catastrophic failures. Strut-and-tie is something that you should be able to do model easily, break it down by hand, and use something really simple to analyze it. And this is why I've created a spreadsheet in MathDot that you can link here that will allow you to try around with strut-and-ties, looking at how you do your node checks, looking at how you do the strut checks and the tie checks. Now these are only estimates and you'll have to modify it to your own codes, but to give you a feel about how the strut-and-tie is actually working in most systems. It's a really simple way that a lot of people can do by hand, and many people have done in the past before they've got fancy softwares. And that's why it makes it an art, because the better you can do this, the more easily you can understand structures and the more efficient that you can make systems. So what are the most overlooked things in strut-and-tie that you can see? Nodes are super critical. They're not just points in a system. You got to know how the forces are coming in, as they're potentially high stress points. They're really critical checks in your system. People just think, I've just done a node, I just take the strut, take the ties, I'm done. However, you're underlooking one of the key aspects of strut and tie, which is that nodal transition, the phases that actually forms how big your struts are, how big a tie that you can have in your system, and where the forces actually need to flow. So there's something that you need to build up, and sometimes you need multiple nodes to get around some of these issues. A lot of the time you'll have a lot of big reductions in stress because forces like to diverge. And that's why struts have lower capacities, because forces like to diverge slightly and cause splits down the middle. A lot of time when you see an overstressed system, you'll see these diagonal lines in the system where the forces are going. See, that looks like a force pattern, and it actually is. It's showing you where the loads are actually going, and that force will diverge out, causing a tension force. And that's why you have bursting of struts, or that's why you need confinement to resist those actions. And that's why that beta factors or reduction factors are really important when assessing them. And if you are over that loads, making sure you're confining them correctly, because those loads are actually real. Struts are really important about where the loads actually go. They typically like in a solid structure to flow at 45 degrees. Now you've got a little bit of play there, as they will move around a little bit, but provided you're in that range, you've got to watch out for to make sure you're either not too steep or too shallow. Something that I've been looking at when I've been looking at a lot of codes recently is some codes don't actually have an understanding of splitting or bursting or bottling. What is that? It's when a strut comes down and it's moving out, as I was saying before. The force likes to spread, and this is why you're getting these bursting actions. It's also the same reason that when you're doing a bearing on a force, you're getting a splitting action in the middle. So that's a bearing force splitting failure. So struts spread out, the forces diverge, and that's why you potentially need cross bracing through those systems to make sure that you're getting that cracking from that divergence. And this is quite critical, especially on deep beams. Forgetting that structures are actually 3D. Especially in bearing caps. Forces just don't flow nicely like they do on a 2D bit of paper. They'll flow out in a 3D point. So not understanding that is really critical, that you might underestimate how the load's actually going. You might draw a line here and a line here and it looks good. However, forces will diverge around those points into a 3D space. As forces like to flow, have you actually captured that? Make sure you're getting all the considerations in that 3D system. Here's the 3 questions that you should be asking yourself every single time you're doing strut and tie. What is my boundary conditions? What is the volume that I'm trying to play with? Where are the forces actually going? Think about it before you start. And from that is the second question, understanding where your compression and tensions are. So starting not just with the supports, but also where the compressions and tensions are in your system is really critical, because that's where the forces are going to go, regardless of where you want them to be. And looking at every single node in your system, do you have all the ties anchored properly? And have you actually confined that area? As the nodes are one of the most highly stressed areas in your system, that are one of the most likely areas to fail. And that judgment call is only proven throughout time when those structures actually stand up. And if you did like this video here, you'll like this video about the art of detailing concrete structures. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can either become a YouTube or Patreon member. Without the support of my YouTube and Patreon members, this type of content would not be possible. As always, keep learning, and I hope to see you next week.